Thanks for listening to this podcast of Trending with Timmerie. If you haven't already subscribed, please catch us wherever you love to listen to your podcast, from the Relevant Radio app to Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review to help other people discover the podcast. Anything you share in terms of episodes, whether it's texting it to a friend, posting on social media, helps to build up the kingdom for God, to help confront the challenging issues we face as a culture, but with joy, with hope, and with an eternal perspective where our faith collides with everyday life, bringing eternal principles to help us live our life joyfully.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
And a hearty good evening to you all, and welcome to Trending with Timmerie. My name is Patrick Conley, sitting in for Timmerie as she is away on maternity leave. And, you know, there's much joy in welcoming a new baby into the world, and also a fair amount of responsibility, too. I'm sure Timmerie values your prayers for her and her family. Thanks so much for continuing to hold them all in prayer. In addition to parenting, being a wife or a husband alone, you know, that brings much joy and much responsibility. And Thursdays are traditionally dedicated to marriage here on Trending. And tonight is no exception. Whether you've been married for many years or just a few, maybe you're soon to be married, or you're hoping to be married, or perhaps you're a single person just wanting to uphold and strengthen good and godly marriages around you. Tonight's show seeks to add encouragement, help, and hope to living out your calling. As for me, my wife and I have been married for over 23 years now, and although we've had our share of the struggles and challenges that life inevitably brings, the joy and peace of loving and confiding in Jesus and in one another, that really far exceeds those rocky times, and they've given us the strength to navigate those times. But I will say that trusting in Jesus and each other, that doesn't mean that we can neglect the other parts of our lives that factor into our relationships, right? In fact, it means that we need to pay greater attention to them. I'm thinking of things like managing our schedules and developing good communication skills, tending to our individual spiritual lives, seeing to our physical health, and taking care of our mental health as well. All of these things, they play into our lives of faith. And that last aspect, really seeking or looking after our mental health, is in particular why I'm so excited to welcome our guests to the show tonight. Pat and Kenna Millea bring their love for people and the church to their work, supporting mental health, faith, and families. They met at the University of Notre Dame, where they both received degrees in theology, among other things. Kenna is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and Pat is a speaker, musician, leader, and former youth minister. God bless him for that. They recently co-founded the Martin Center for Integration, an organization supporting the integration of mental health and faith, and they co-host a podcast called This Whole Life. They have been married for 13 years, and they live in West St. Paul, Minnesota, with their 7, count them 7, children. Pat and Kenna, welcome to the program.
Hey, Patrick. Good to talk to you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well tonight. We got a little bit of snow last night over here in central Wisconsin. Did you get any there in the Twin Cities?
Yeah, today we did, which is the delight of our children, to be honest. It is a good day for our 5-year-old when he wakes up to freshly fallen snow.
Okay, but did you have a snow day? That's the question.
Oh, no. Not so lucky.
Just a snowy day, which is,
snowy, yes.
The annoying variety, not the snow day, which our children love. No.
Yes, fantastic. The 5-year-old got to rejoice, perhaps, but when the kids go slogging off to school in the midst of a downpour of snow, that's kind of the worst, because you always want to hear that. Oh no, school's been canceled, right? Anyway, well, I'm delighted to have you on the program. We've spoken many times in the past, and you've appeared on the show that I host for the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. Practicing Catholic can be found over at practicingcatholicshow.com, and we have a great podcasted interview with the two of you on that. But I'm delighted to have you here on Trending as well, especially on a marriage night. Maybe just start out by introducing us a little bit to yourselves, and if it's not too invasive, if it's not too personal, can you just run us through how the two of you met? I mean, you met at Notre Dame, but was there any special kind of a meet cute, as they say, that the two of you met? Eyes meeting across a crowded room, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's a fun story in that we both were, friends, acquaintances through school, through student government. And truly, really, at the same time, one day, it was that turnaround and go, who is that guy? I've never seen that attractive man before. And come to find it's my friend of 4 years who suddenly the lights came on for me and I realized what an incredible man of God and good looking, trumpet playing, bar dancing kind of guy he was. It was the friendship that flourished into dating. We really didn't look back. I mean, once we turned the corner into more than friends, so to say, we really never looked back. So continued to support each other in ministry. One of the things we've been talking about lately is as we shift our focus, our work focus, how our nights are becoming more free of the regular commitment of parish life ministry and how that's never happened in the history of our time together. We've always worked nights. That kind of has tracked our relationship, the parish ministry life.
Oh, that's pretty sweet. I like that.
I was speaking this weekend and was telling a group about the first time that we met. And it was like Kenna described, it was in the student government building at Notre Dame. We were both involved in student government. And I was thinking back on it in the terms of this talk, but it's this really beautiful vision of providence to me that you never could have convinced me 5 minutes after we met in passing, did not have an immediate friendship or, any kind of follow-up from that.
Not sparks flying right at okay. All right. Yep. Fair enough.
Yeah. Right. I mean, she seemed very friendly, lovely, pretty, and we both just moved on amiably. So it was fine. And I had no inkling that woman would be my beautiful bride and would bear 7 amazing children, and we would share ownership of a 12-passenger van. Right. That didn't cross my mind in 2003. So it's just God has plans that are bigger and more hilarious than I could ever imagine, and it's a pretty great adventure.
I don't doubt, but what bigger and more hilarious? That's a great way of describing it, and I am so grateful that you said it. If for people who are unfamiliar with Pat, just having heard some of his talks, I mean, he does integrate humor so well, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of that tonight. By the way, that's great. But maybe that's one of the things I would like to talk about. What now, after 13 years of marriage? Some of the things that you've seen as key aspects in marriage. Now, of course, it oftentimes comes up with when you're asking single people, what do you look for in someone else? They'll say sense of humor is something good. But I wanted to ask the Milleas. So, Kenna and Pat, how has a sense of humor played into your marriage and the successful navigation of your marriage?
Oh my gosh. Such an asset. And as you pointed out very aptly, Patrick, Pat is the bearer of the sense of humor and he draws me into it. It's such a gift that he can see the levity in a situation. Our life is almost constant chaos. I don't think that's overstating it. It is as one of my uncles said, life is a series of logistical choices and challenges. And that is what it is when you have, 7 kids, 12 and under, and a business, with employees that you're trying to support. So Pat being able to remind us, not to take ourselves too seriously, not to hold tight, to the moment, as chaotic, as frenzied, or as upsetting as it is. That sense of detachment that I think sense of humor brings with it is great for this life that we're living, to let those, harried moments pass us by, so that we can receive the next good thing, which really is, just about to happen. So, that's a gift that Pat brings. I don't know that I can claim so much that's a contribution I make to this marriage.
You're kind of the straight woman, huh?
I really am. If you're familiar with the temperaments, I am a choleric and a melancholic through and through.
Okay. Yeah. Right. I get that. So Pat, do you? I'm guessing, Pat, you take advantage of this. You play into that. My wife is a melancholic as well, and so it's fun. It's fun to play that off of her.
Yeah, I am. I bring the sanguine. That's for sure. It's there's nothing that can't be a party as far as I'm concerned. So it is really it's a joy to bring the levity and to be someone for whom humor comes really naturally. It's nice to hear Kenna say that. Actually, I think I am hilarious, but our children at times disagree. So to know that Kenna sees it my way is really. That's helpful for me. Thank you, babe. I appreciate that. Yeah, it really is. There are ways that it actually is similar to some of the youth ministry experiences that I had in my previous vocational career. That a great youth minister that I knew and that I worked with really closely was very adamant that in the course of a beautiful, faith-filled, say, retreat experience or a conference or something like that, where the most important things are non-negotiably the Mass and adoration and confession and opportunities for deep prayer and deep connection with others, she was adamant that you have got to find time to laugh at a thing like that. That the depth of the sacraments and the depth of connection with God can't find root as deeply if we're not able to laugh and to rejoice and to be people of joy acted out in real time. So we would throw in a ridiculously dumb skit, between confession and prayer time, just to lighten the mood, to break the tension, to give everyone a chance to breathe for a second and then get back to reality. And I found that a lot of marriage as well, that there's a lot of heavy and sometimes really difficult things in marriage, and that can become really overwhelming unless we kind of have mandatory fun time at certain points in the marriage,
Yeah, I get that. It sounds like a patron saint of yours might be Saint Philip Neri, the patron saint of joy and humor and that sort of thing.
Amen. Yep.
Yeah.
Him and Saint Lawrence. Yeah, those are my boys. That's right.
That's right. Turn me over. I'm done on this side, right? Yeah. Very good. I love it. Okay. Well, I'm grateful to hear you say that. And I got to say that even looking at your websites for the Martin Center for Integration and the This Whole Life podcast, which we will get into in just a moment here, but just to see your pictures, even they just are, the joy is effusive. I can see just through the pictures, so that's a wonderful thing and a great element, as you said. I know just recently a friend of mine was saying when life is at its most stressful, that's when you need to be reminded that there is humor in life, there is joy to be had in life. So. Wonderful. Whether it's dad humor, a dad who thinks himself hilarious, or whatever it is. Yeah. Well, I think
Absolutely.
I think it goes without saying that that the sense of humor, as I said, that there are many elements to a good marriage as well. Now, you made the transition then from being just the two of you to having kids, of being parents, and I want to ask how your lives changed when that happened. If you can reflect just a little bit on what elements changed for the better, or maybe as a challenge to your relationship with one another, specifically your relationship as husband and wife, when kids started to enter the picture.
I remember my first two reflections, one of them being my relationship with God and one being my relationship with Kenna. I remember I was traveling somewhere to speak, and I can't remember where, but I was in the Atlanta airport, and I remember talking to a college friend probably maybe a month or two after our oldest had been born. And I remember explaining to him this new reflection that I had come up with, that if I look at this little child and I love her that much, it gave me this really amazing perspective into God the Father's love for me and for us, and the way that God looks at us, that if me, fallen, broken sinner Pat, can love someone this much, then I can't fathom or begin to fathom God the Father's perfect, inescapable, unrelenting love for me. So I think that was the first reflection, and that certainly led me to a deeper sense of my call to love Kenna as well, which I already understood to an extent, but was even more motivated maybe after coming to realize that relationship with God. And then I think with our marriage, it was really beautiful and interesting in some ways. I know that I kind of had an immediate reaction in two directions. One of them was this intense sense of appreciation and love and gratitude for Kenna. And there were things about Kenna that I never would have known if I didn't see her as a mom. So being able to watch her love and serve and give, and that was just during pregnancy. And then the baby was born, and then she was loving, serving, and giving to a whole new level. That gave me a whole new sense of appreciation for this new facet of the woman I loved that I had never seen before or had that perspective before. And it brought along with it at times the particular challenge of having to constantly choose to be on the same team. That the two of us as husband and wife had to constantly have conversations and sometimes disagreements that came back to the point that we are in this together, we're teammates, we have the same mission, that a child adds a whole lot of demands and a whole lot of responsibilities. And there can be that temptation sometimes, especially in the midst of disagreement, to look at a spouse and think, well, clearly they don't see it my way. So I'm on my own team in this little project here that is a baby, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. So it was helpful for me to get back to the reality of, all right, no matter when we disagree, we are always and forever teammates. So how can we connect and work together in the midst of this new amazing call?
Kenna, how about you? Any reflections?
A little simpler, a little more singular in that it just made my laser focus. It gave me laser focus, I suppose, on the mission of like, what is my job to love this soul so that it would like thirst for heaven. This child that I've been gifted, and then certainly, like Pat said, kind of that reflection comes around and it deepens toward my spouse. Whenever I ask our kids to do something that they don't want to do, which is only like 73 times a day, I say to them, like, you remember the rules? You remember the rules? And they're like, oh my gosh. And then like the number one rule is like mom's job is to get you to heaven. And then the second job is to keep you healthy. So healthy and safe. So, usually the thing I'm asking falls into one of those two categories. And so it really simplified my life. It became this litmus test of, this thing that I'm trying to make room for on my calendar, or this thing that I'm trying to find money for in our budget. Like, how does it serve that singular purpose of getting our family to heaven, raising a family of saints? And so it simplifies it in certain ways, and then it definitely intensified. I mean, the weight of the responsibility and the gravity of this mission definitely came screaming home to me, the more I pondered that and prayed with that. So double-edged sword there.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate that. And then as more and more children came into the picture, and Kenna, you said earlier, constant chaos. You can pretty assuredly say that. Now, this is the disclaimer from my end, that my wife and I, we have lots of kids in our lives as a Catholic school principal and as a DRE for a parish, but we don't have them in our home. We haven't been blessed with children of our own. But I know many parents who say that there was a time when the addition of just one more kid was kind of an exponentially greater task. Like it just blew things out of the water. I had a dear friend who he reflected having one kid was like having one kid. Having two kids was like having two kids. And then his wife gave birth to twin boys. And he said having 4 kids was like having 9 kids. And so that's kind of, and I'm just wondering, kind of maybe to you first, do you remember a time like that? Was there a time when the addition of this additional child, it just kind of blew everything up in an exponential way?
Well, yeah, if you're really ready for us to be vulnerable and transparent, I can tell you a story or 4. But no, so I remember, Pat and I talking and praying after our 4th was born about Pat's desire for us to be open to another baby. And I said to him, we were on a trip for a friend's wedding out in Malibu, of all places, away from our children, in the hills of California. And he was just explaining to me this deep desire he had. And I said, but babe, like, we've got this under control. Like, we know we've got 4, like, we know what we're doing now. Like, I think we've got this, the market cornered. And he said, just one more. I kid you not, we had identical twins.
Okay, so this.
and then had so that's 5 and 6, girls 5 and 6, and then our 7th was born less than a year after our twins.
Oh,
so we
man.
had 3 babies in a year during the
Wow.
pandemic. It was really special. And so, yes, this exponential that you talk about. And a girlfriend of mine, when I was relaying the story to her, I don't know if she came up with this or she heard it from someone, but they said, always have one more than you think you can handle. and what I'm learning is there is this deep humility in the chaos. Poverty of spirit is something that has really sown deep roots into my heart in this season of life, because I'm aware of my limitations, and it humbles me every hour on the hour.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I'm speaking with Pat and Kenna Millea of the Martin Center for Integration into This Whole Life podcast, which, you know what, we want to get into, and I will do that. But first, we need to take a short break. So there's lots more to talk about here on Trending with Timmery with my guest, Pat and Kenna Millea, as we're focusing in on marriage for Thursday on Trending with Timmery. We'll be right back right after these short messages.
You're listening to Trending with Timmery, where you can discuss what matters most to you. Join the conversation, 888-914-9149.
And welcome back to Trending with Timmery. My name is Patrick Conley, sitting in for Timmery on this Thursday evening, where we are focusing in on marriage. My guests this evening are Pat and Kenna Millea, who bring their love for people and the church to their work supporting mental health, faith, and families. And they've just been sharing some joyful and very insightful parts of what it means to be married, what it means to be husband and wife, and what it means to be parents as well. So if you would like to chat with them, ask them a question to draw from their experience, please do give us a call. Join the conversation, 888-914-9149. You're very welcome. But I want to get into this Martin Center for Integration. Now, this was a brainchild of yours, and Ken, I know you are a licensed marriage and family therapist. But how did this come together? I mean, where was the genesis of this idea for the Martin Center for Integration?
So it came out of a lot of conversations over the course of years, in a lot of discernment and trying to listen to the Holy Spirit about where we were being led as a family and in service to the church and the world. Both of us had worked in parish ministry, me longer than Kenna, and then she transitioned into marriage and family therapy. So this past Easter of 22, it kind of culminated in a Holy Spirit novena that we did together, in discernment in every different direction. We just kind of put everything about our life on the table, said, Lord, do what you want with it. If you want us to move, we'll move. If you want us to have our kids go to different schools, we'll do that. If you want us to homeschool, we'll do that. And we, good news, bad news. The good news is that a lot of our current life was confirmed as going down the right path. And the bad news is that I was wrong, because I had told Kenna that we ought never to work together because I love you too much to work with you, and vice versa. And it turns out that God had better plans, and we were led in this direction. So she forever had been had this dream of a Catholic mental health facility, clinic, something like that. And that was kind of where the dream began, because around Easter, during this novena, was the first time that I felt the call to join her in that mission. I was always supportive of it. She was going to be amazing whether I was involved or not, but it was the first time that I got the sense that it was something that I was called to join in as well. Because we really we've seen a lot in our own personal experience, a lot in our ministry experience, of the ways that our beautiful Catholic faith can be at times held as distinct from good, sound mental health resources.
Right.
That, the mental health field out in the nation tends to be exceptionally secular and at times openly hostile to faith, especially Catholicism. So a good Catholic looking for sound mental health care sometimes really struggles to find a place that will be attentive to their soul as well as their mind. And then, unfortunately, in the church, there are at times really good, very loving, very faithful people who, maybe without meaning to do so, will discredit the value of good mental health care for the sake of maybe over-spiritualizing mental health struggles. You know, we've talked to dozens and dozens of people over the past year who have said things like, you know, they were told in the course of losing their husband or going through miscarriage or struggles in their marriage, well, all you need to do is pray about it more. And, you know, clearly you haven't surrendered that to Jesus in adoration. And so what we felt the call to do is to step into the middle of that and hopefully be a voice that says, please continue to pray. Please go to adoration.
Yes.
The more the better. Absolutely. Surrender your whole being to Christ. And also, God has put legitimate and beautiful resources in our lives to care for your mind. So a therapist may be in order as well as a deep prayer life.
Mm-hmm. Kenna, I want to hear from you on this as well, but I just want to interject here and say that yet another reason why I can sense the joy and the strength in your marriage is I heard Pat say right near the beginning of that answer, I was wrong. And I think as husbands, we have to learn this phrase. It's tough. I want to say it's hard. It's hard to say it. But Pat, you did a fine job.
Too, Patrick, and that's the line you grab onto. That's fine. Okay, all right.
That will be offering a webinar.
Yeah, exactly. You absolutely did say other things, and you're absolutely right, and that's what I tried to hint at it in my opening to the show. Is that yes, we can either run the risk of kind of going too far one way or the other, too far into a highly secularized portion of mental health care, or a hyper spiritualized kind of look at some of these things while ignoring the resources that we have for mental health. So, Kenna, over to you. Where did this idea germinate in your own mind and heart?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like so many good ideas, they come from lived experience. It was in my own search for sound mental health care when I needed resources and skills, someone to sort through, you know, the tangles of life with, and found myself wanting that this desire to create a place where people could receive comprehensive care, you know, whether it be marriage therapy, child play therapy, family therapy and reconciliation of relationships. So that dream honestly has been with me ever since I did go back to school, which was 12 years ago now maybe. That I knew. Along with it, I also knew that I wanted to supervise, that I wanted to help form other clinicians to, you know, bring together what I had learned through my master's in theology at Notre Dame and then my master's in marriage family therapy at St. Mary's, you know, to draw those together and to share that with others who perhaps hadn't yet done the work of the integration on a theoretical level. So the NCI strives not only to provide care, but also to help form clinicians. And I knew, particularly that piece, that if I was going to step away from maybe more of the direct clinical care of seeing clients myself to take time to form others, that I would need Pat's partnership to run this business. And so, you know, while the dream has been on my heart for a long time, it wasn't until he gave his yes almost a year ago that we could really start to make plans. And I remember calling my spiritual director to, you know, share this with him and to ask for his prayers and to get his feedback about it. And originally we just talked about a clinic. And he said, Kenna, I think you got to go back and really be generous with the Lord and let him draw big, bright, bold pictures for you of what he wants. And that's when the other elements of speaking and training, and as well as the podcast, this desire we had to make, you know, the messages we wanted to share about mental health and faith available, not just to the limited number of clients who would come into the office, but, you know, through the podcast, through speaking and training, to reach many more people So yeah, and again, none of that without Pat, because as you can already tell, like he really brings the fire when it comes to the speaking, the training, and the podcasting.
Yeah.
So we call it our eighth child for a reason. It's a beautiful blend of our gifts.
Yeah, and I love that you both use the phrase, the common mission that you have as husband and wife and as parents. And that's really, I think that is one thing that we all have to keep in mind as regular practicing Catholics, that when the Lord calls us into these states in life of being husband and wife, being parents, that sort of thing, that a vocation always has a mission, right? I mean, that's he calls us for a reason, for something that he seeks to do in and through us. And I just think looking at the Martin Center for Integration, hearing about it, having heard about it, looking at your website, that sort of thing, it's a great addition, and it seems to be a great resource for the church, for Catholics specifically. And as you provide counseling and podcasting, like you said, speaking, training, presentations that address mental health and spiritual needs. And so what kind of, is there any kind of limitation on the types of people that your services are tailored for, Pat?
No, not at all. There's a definite driving focus on spiritual, mental, and physical integration in everything that we do. But that is, from our perspective, that's the way that we feel called to serve through the Martin Center. Anyone who can benefit from that type of care is more than welcome in our office, in our sessions, as podcast listeners. We certainly have people who have benefited from the work of the Lord through the Martin Center who are from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. I was just with a group over the weekend, an ecumenical Christian group that a good number of the folks there were Catholic, but there were folks from every other denomination that you can probably imagine. And it's our firm belief, and it's been confirmed in a lot of different ways, that the truth of this integrative, that's a word, right? Sure. The truth of this message
it is
of
now.
Integration, it's incarnational. So it's not merely what we believe as Catholics, although it is certainly that. It is also ingrained into our being as humans, that it's just who we are. So anybody can benefit from this, and maybe Catholics can understand some of the language, some of the approach a little bit more clearly, but there are definitely benefits here for any human.
Yeah. That's great, and I love the breadth of the target there as well. And so you've mentioned it a few times, but we need to tie in to this whole life podcast. So was this always, Kenna, meant to be part of the Martin Center, that you were going to do podcasting?
No, I mean, again, this is, just the providential way the Lord unfolded this plan for us. So originally, when we had a more narrow focus on, a clinic, we want to train clinicians, we want to be a place for, the young and the old and everybody in between to receive sound care, integrated care. And Pat said, well, how are we going to let the world know about this message? Because this is kind of new, Kenna. Like, this isn't the typical psychotherapy, mission agenda. And so he said, what if we do, a couple podcast episodes where we can introduce the clinicians and we could talk a bit about our approach and our values and our vision. And before we knew it, it had really taken off into realizing, like, this is actually a highly accessible means of disseminating this information. And it needs to be more than promoting the MCI's clinical services. There's just a lot that we want to share, and we want people to have access to it as quickly and as often and as they can. So no, the podcast was not always the dream. I actually, to be totally honest, the speaking and training, the podcasting, it's not my favorite part. Pat and I joke behind closed doors that, like, I do it because no one else that I know of is doing it. And so until the Lord calls someone to take my spot in it, I'm like, all right, I'll share the message. But I much prefer the one-on-one, the intensity of a therapy session. The speaking and training, the stage, all of that, the mic, not my jam so much. But I really do. I feel like it is a message that God has put on my heart, and he has let me live out the goodness of it. And so I got to share it.
Well, now you said that behind closed doors, but you realize now with the thousands of listeners to our program tonight on Trending with Timmery, yes, around the world, you just said it. You just admitted it. But Kenna, we are grateful that you took to the mic tonight to join us because you have so much to offer. Again, my guests tonight are Pat and Kenna Millea. They are the founding couple behind the Martin Center for Integration, as well as the This Whole Life podcast. And you know what? I want to get into This Whole Life podcast. There's some fantastically tantalizing episodes on here, and I want to unpack that a little bit more. But first, again, we're going to take a short break. We're going to, have a little bit of a breather here, but when we come back, we're going to get into some of the episodes here and more advice on being for mentally healthy marriages and kids. We're going to get to that right after this. So stay with us here on Trending with Timmery. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Trending with Timmery, where you can discuss what matters most to you. Join the conversation, 888-914-9149.
Welcome back to Trending with Timmery. My name is Patrick Conley, sitting in for Timmery tonight. Grateful to producer and Patrick Alog, who's manning the phones for us tonight. And my guests are Pat and Kenna Millea of the Martin Center for Integration and the This Whole Life podcast. Grateful to be speaking with you, the two of you tonight. And there's so many things that we could talk about here. But if you could just say that there's one kind of central concept or feature that really everything boils down to or comes to, what would you say? I mean, is there something like that when it comes to mental health and faith and marriage and family?
Yeah, in the work that both of us have done ministry-wise, and then certainly educated by a lot of Kenna's clinical background and education in psychology and therapy, it's brought us back to this one key point that kind of collects everything. There are tendencies in marriage to focus on a lot of different things that ought to be good. And they're the kinds of things that people focus on when they're engaged. Things like we need to be good at communication. We certainly need to have a good faith life and a prayer life that is praying together and supporting one another. We need to be able to parent well and to identify our values clearly so that we keep on the same page. We need to work together on finances. But the more that we talked with others and the more that we kind of considered in our own lives, it all comes down to this idea of connection with my spouse, that all of those things are expressions of the ways that I desire to be connected to my bride. I want to be known. I want to know her more deeply every day. I want to be loved. I want to grow in love for her. That when there is a breakdown in communication, the reason that feels unsettling and produces anxiety in me is because it makes me a little bit scared that maybe I don't have the connection that I desire, that there's something in our connection that's missing. When we're not on the same page about finances or about our kids' activities, or even just something as simple as we miscommunicate on the schedule and one of us forgets to pick up something that we said we would, those are all really minor ways that we feel the itch of, man, I really just desire deeper connection with you, my spouse. We all seek intimacy with the Lord. And so our intimacy in our marriage is just one beautiful expression, the most beautiful expression for us folks who are called to marriage, of how we live out that intimacy in a human relationship.
Very good. How about you, Kenna? And would you agree with that? Is connection kind of a central, if not the central issue?
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm thinking of it more from the clinical perspective, of course. I see couples, unfortunately, often at their worst. So one of the things that we work really hard on is how can you, pardon me, I'm getting over a cold. How can you slow down what's going on between the two of you so that connection can rise to the top as your priority? I can think in our own life. Again, I'm just going to use us as an example in total humility and vulnerability here. But we were arguing last week, and
perish the thought.
What?
And,
this happens?
I know.
In the Millea household.
Scandal.
Okay.
Scandal, you guys. How it doesn't happen more often, maybe, is like what I want to know with all of that going on. But we were having an argument, and the kids had gone to bed, and when I say argument, there's not like yelling and things of that nature, but it is tense, and we are displeased with each other. And we were sitting on the couch, and Pat had kind of, shared with me so calmly, so just really articulated himself well with his clear, objective, behavioral request of change from me. And I was seething. I was so angry. Felt like his request was unjust. I mean, I was so angry. And he was waiting for a response from me. And I said, Pat, I cannot honestly, sincerely say that my number one desire right now is to be connected to you. I need a minute. And we had to take time to let things cool off. I think I was like, can you just pray for us? Because this is really not working for me. And so he did. He led us in prayer. And the whole time he was praying, I think I was explaining to the Lord why I was right and he was wrong. But at the end of the prayer, I was able to finally come to this place of, you're right. I do desire to be connected to you. I can hear what you're saying. It doesn't mean that I don't get to also have upset feelings. It doesn't mean that I don't also get to have a request for change. But if there's not a right order of wanting communion with him, then no attempt at finances or scheduling, certainly conflict resolution, is going to be fruitful.
I think that's a keen insight right there, and this is perhaps a little variations on a theme here. But one of the phrases that my wife and I like to talk about frequently, or we like to throw around frequently, is to one another is "I love you all the time" and "I like you most of the time." That's kind of how we put it. That there's an element
Absolutely.
there's an element of I am dedicated to you, and I am dedicated to you, and willing the best for you. That deep sense of love and care that's there, but that doesn't mean, like you said, Kenna, that doesn't mean that I'm always going to feel like, oh yeah, I'm on cloud nine every time I'm around you, and yeah, exactly. Well,
that would be an unrealistic expectation for sure.
that would be Pat and Kenna. And by the way, we have some commonality there. Pat, you and I share a same first name, and Kenna, Kenna, you share nearly a first name with my wife, Kendra, Kendra, and so yeah, that's really good. And so, we'll have to get together for drinks or something. And by the way, in case people just want to do a Google search for Pat and Kenna Millea, your last name is Millea. And so there's just that's cool, but I'm guessing that there's a better way to get in touch with the Martin Center for Integration and for This Whole Life podcast. So you want to share some websites with us?
Absolutely, yeah. You can reach us at martincenterforintegration.com. Don't be confused. We are not the Martin family. We are the Millea family. Our business takes its patronage from the Martin family of St. Therese of Lisieux and her parents, Louis and Zélie. So you can reach out at martincenterforintegration.com. And you can reach us via the podcast, either on Instagram at This Whole Life Podcast or at thiswholelifepodcast.com.
Yeah, and that comes up right away as when I searched it on my podcasting platform. It comes up right away. Now, just in the last few minutes of the show here, I want to get into a little bit more about the podcast specifically, because there's some great. I've listened some, but I haven't hit all the episodes yet. And I know people have different strategies when it comes to taking on a new podcast. Do you start with the most recent episode, or you go and pick one that sounds intriguing, or do you start from the very beginning? So I'm wondering. If you could recommend, how would you recommend that people start listening to This Whole Life podcast?
Well, it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to
thousands of listeners, Pat, around the world, thanks to the Relevant Radio app. Right. Okay. Anyway, yes.
Well, to any of those thousands of listeners who are 17-year-old high school boys, I would start with the Mental Health in the Marvel Cinematic Universe episode that we did with a good priest friend of ours, Father Nathan LaLiberte.
It's okay if
for anyone who maybe is not
51-year-old men listen to that too, right? I mean, because that's next up on my list, I'm sure.
A 40-year-old man and a 30-something-year-old priest were the two guys geeking out about the MCU on the podcast tells you that, yes, all are welcome. No judgment at all.
Okay, very good.
For anyone who's not in that particular demographic, I would say as someone who, is not on the inside track in some of the clinical lingo here, there's not a bad place to start for sure. But the first 3 episodes in particular, we scripted out intentionally to kind of lay the foundation for what this work of integration even looks like. That our mind, our body, our soul, they're all interconnected. They all make up one human person. So what does it mean that God has a loving plan for my mind? What does it mean that God desires for me to be mentally healthy, and that there are things that he puts in my life to support my mental health so that I can be holy and happy and healthy internally and in my relationship. So starting at the beginning is probably a great way to just start things off.
Okay, very good. Kenna, any favorite episodes from your perspective yet?
I would say the Managing Family Relationships, which we released just prior to Thanksgiving this past year, is my favorite because it's my bread and butter. It's about family systems, and it's about the always tricky, never perfect, there isn't an exact right answer on how we transition from our family of origin to our family of creation, with our spouse, with any children, with a new circle of friends. So I love that. I think it's also a message that isn't heard maybe in other places. It's particular to the field of marriage and family therapy. And then actually, Pat just finished editing this weekend's episode on grief. And it's very personal to me. It's probably the most vulnerable episode we've recorded yet. So I'm looking forward to the conversations that it will open up with our listeners and with my clients. That comes out this Sunday, January 22nd.
Wonderful. And a very needed thing. And that's one of the things, too, that we could spend another hour talking about it. We got the Family Rosary Across America that's going to boot us off here in about 5 minutes. But that's obviously of greater importance. But, we can talk about that because I was thinking about that specifically. There's times of grief in all of our lives, and that can be really hard, especially if it is losing a loved one or something along those lines. It can really affect us, maybe even in ways that we wouldn't even necessarily perceive right at the outset. So maybe just a little snapshot into that, since it's just about to debut. I mean, are there ways of getting through grief in a good, healthy, and godly way? And if so, can you give us a little teaser about what you talk about on the episode? Yeah,
absolutely. So to your question, for sure, there are ways to engage with grief. And really, our premise on the podcast episode is that it is a way in which we can be drawn into deeper communion with the Lord. It can be something, if we let it can be something that pulls us closer to His most sacred heart. It allows us to taste, the reality of His sacrifice, of the way He grieves, for us when we turn from Him. So that experience of loss is rich, and that there is much to be gained from it, as difficult as it is to face and to really work with. When it shows up, can we welcome it? Can we trust that if God is with us, He will show us what He needs us to learn from it, and it can bring us into deeper communion with Him as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true, very true. I'm grateful that you're doing this, and I can already think I'm compiling a list of people in my head that I'd like to send it to. And I got to say, just I'm over on the one of the podcasting platforms and looking at it, and at least on this one, on the Apple Podcast platform, you have at least 80 friends, because you've gotten 80 ratings, and every one of them is 5.0 stars. I mean, that's so you're running a perfect record over on Apple Podcasts. So just so you know, that's a very you got a good thing going on here. So in
I already
closing,
struggle with pride, Patrick. Don't contribute.
as my wife likes to say, his head's big enough already, which I do. I have a rather large physical head. But anyway, just in closing, just anything, I mean, to go back to that whole issue of connection, anything just in 30 seconds or less from each one of you, what's one practical thing I can do to foster greater connection with my spouse?
There's actually a prayer method that we picked up at a marriage retreat about a couple years ago from a great priest, Father Scott Trainer in South Dakota, that is a great way of connecting with the Lord and each other. And it involves listening to my spouse, hearing them share about their day, especially how they felt about the events of their day, and then immediately turning together to the Lord in prayer, and me, who has been listening to that, verbally praying out loud for my spouse to God. So I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm not giving advice. I'm listening actively for the purpose of prayer, for lifting them up to our Father. And then we switch. We switch roles. And then I get to tell her about my day, about my feelings about my day. And she responds by bringing me to God and asking for his blessing on me. And it's been such a beautiful way that a lot of families, ours included, have been blessed by intimacy with God and with one another.
Kenna, we got about 15 seconds for a response from you as well.
Yeah, no, just that that exact method that Pat's describing we used this past week after being apart for 4 days. And it was such a rich way to re-enter into the marriage. Can't recommend it enough.
All right. Fostering Connection with Pat and Kenna Millea, Martin Center for Integration.com, and check out their podcast over at This Whole Life Podcast. I'm Patrick Conley. So grateful that you joined us here on Trending with Timmery. Family Rosary Across America is up next, so stay tuned. We'll see you next time.